We are going to continue looking at general form today and looking at a couple more problems that we can solve. I think you guys are ready to tackle these kind of problems on your own. So instead of watching the video and copying down what I'm doing, I'm going to instead encourage you guys to pause the video and do the work that that you think it will take to answer these two questions, because I think you already know how to do this stuff. And it would be great if you would try it out, think about what strategy you would use to solve these two problems, and then unpause the video and come back and watch what I do and then see how it matches up, see what strategies I use. Your strategy might be different than mine, but equally as awesome. So if we end up at the same answer, then you got it. And I would be really interested in hearing what strategy you used instead of the one I used. So yeah, you're going to pause the video. You're going to try these questions on your own. Think about what strategies you're going to use, and then yeah, and then follow along and see how great minds think alike. Okay, so you pause the video, right? And now you're back. Really pause the video right now. Okay, so here's hoping you did that. Let's take a look at the first one. Let's determine the x and y intercept of the line whose equation is 3x minus 4y plus 24 equals 0. Well, by now I hope you recognize that this equation is in general form. And general form, again, has very little information in it, right? No m's, no slope, and no points. So give it. So they match up, but we have no information. If we just wanted to find out the y-intercept of this particular line, right, this degree 1 equation, I would recommend putting it into slope-intercept form, right, like we did in the previous lesson. But because we need to figure out what the x-intercept is also, let's try using the same strategy for both. We'll do one strategy here. Okay, so we're not going to change this into slope-intercept form, although we could, and that would tell us what our y-intercept is. What we're going to do instead is we're going to go back and try to remember what happens at the x-intercept. So remember, the x-intercept is where the function crosses the x-axis. So that's where y equals 0. Okay, and the y-intercept is where the function crosses the y-axis, right? It's that vertical intercept. And what happens there is x equals 0. So if we make y equal to 0 and put it into this equation to figure out what the x value is, then we'll know what the x-intercept is. And then again, if we make x equal to 0 in this equation and solve for y, we'll know what the y is. Okay, so let's do that. Let's figure out what's going on here. All right, so my x-intercept, I'm going to make y equal to 0. Okay, so I've got y equals 0. So that means I have 3x minus 4 times 0 plus 24 equals 0. So when we do that, what we're saying is, hey, like, what's the value of x when y equals 0? So what's the other part of the ordered pair where x, what value of x satisfies this? So we have to solve for x here. So 4 times 0 is 0. So we're left with 3x plus 24 equals 0. Well, move the 24 over, right? This is just two-step algebra. You guys have done this a lot. And we're left with 3x equals negative 24. Divide both sides by 3. X equals negative 8. So that's my x-intercept, negative 8, 0. This line crosses the x-axis at negative 8, 0. Okay? This is a really, really important concept. Like, we're going to do this all the time in the next, for the next 2 years of math. We're going to be looking at these x and y intercepts. They're really important points in a function. What's happening in the real world. And in pre-cal, well, they do a lot to kind of support the arithmetic that we have to do. We don't spend a lot of time in the real world in pre-cal. Okay, but this x and y intercept concept is really important for all functions. Okay, so that's how we would find the x-intercept. If you didn't pause the video before and try the work on your own, pause it now to find the y-intercept. Use my strategy and try to find the y-intercept on your own. Okay, and then when you unpause the video, you can stop and check your work compared to my work. Okay, we're back. So let's find our y-intercept. And that's where x equals 0. So we're going to put 0 in place of x, right? We always put, whenever we substitute a value into an equation, it's a really good idea to put it in brackets. Okay, that's just a really good habit to get into. Okay, and there's the rest of my equation. So, and this time we're solving for y. 3 times 0 is 0, so we're left with negative 4y plus 24 equals 0. Move that 24 over, right? Minus 4y equals minus 24, and divide by negative 4. Y equals 6. So my y-intercept is 0, 6. And that leads us to another strategy actually for graphing things in general form. You'll notice that 3 and 4 are both factors of 24. So that's how come we ended up with these nice whole numbers here. Okay, so if you notice that for general form, you can just find your x-intercept and your y-intercept, and you can use that to graph, right? If your x-intercept is at, let's go, negative 8, 0, and your y-intercept is at 0, 6, hey, you have 2 points and you can make a line. Okay, so that's really cool. That's another way that we can actually graph something in general form. Okay, so that's, hopefully you're seeing where all these pieces start to fit together. We've done x-intercept and y-intercept already, right? We did a candle assignment. So we've looked at these concepts before. We used the y-intercept a lot when we graphed in slope-intercept form. So there's all these little tools now that you have in your toolbox that hopefully fit together, and you can start to see how you can use different tools to solve different problems. Okay? All right, let's take a look at the second question here. Determine the slope of this line in general form. 5x minus 2y plus 12 equals 0 is in general form. General form gives us no information at all. So let's change it to a form that has some information. And again, our easiest form to work with is y equals mx plus b. Okay, so my recommendation is to just change lines to that form, because then when we have this guy looking like that guy, right? When this guy looks like that guy, then we can pull that slope out of it. Okay, so 5x minus 2y plus 12 equals 0. All we have to do, remember, is move the 5x and the 12 over to the other side of the equation. And when we do that, they change signs. Okay, that's how we end up with negative 5x and negative 12. And remember, we don't want 2y, we want 1y. So we're going to divide everything by negative 2. And we're left with y on the left-hand side equals 5x over 2, or 5 over 2x, same thing. Remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive number. So this is a positive slope. You should end up with a positive slope from this guy. And then negative 12 divided by negative 2 is positive 6. And it doesn't really matter what the y-intercept turns out to be. If this was a fraction, it doesn't matter, because remember, our question is just asking for the slope. So let's make sure we answer the question. The slope is 5 over 2, and not 5 over 2x. X isn't part of the slope, right? It's the 5 over 2 is the slope. Okay, x is our independent variable. So we have a rise of 5 and a run of 2. And I hope that makes sense. I hope that this is the work that you got. I think I can think of a couple of other ways to answer. I can think of another couple of ways to answer this question. So you might have used a different strategy. You could find the x-intercept and the y-intercept and have 2 points and then use your slope formula. That's a lot of work, but it should work. You could do a couple of different things. Okay, so and try them in your independent practice, and then please send me a message. Tell me how you're doing. Okay.